Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife and empowers you to live a more vibrant second half. If you find us on YouTube today, please don't forget to ring that bell so you don't miss any more of these amazing conversations. If you happen to be listening to me on a podcast platform, please remember to subscribe and share this content as we are trying to build a community of women in midlife who have access to the most powerful and important resources that we need to live a life that is full after 40. So today I'm going to be talking about midlife and our brains and our hormones with my guest. She's going to talk about the brain changes that happen to women after 40 as they lose their hormones. My guest is revisiting us. It's Dr. Mindy Pelz. She is a fasting and hormone expert. Dr. Mindy, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's so delightful to be here. And I feel like I'm with my tribe. So I'm so grateful to be here.
We are so your tribe because your message is so empowering. And you've gone through such a metamorphosis in the last 2 years. You've re-promoted your book, Menopause Reset, and you are just a depth and wealth of information. So I'm really excited to talk about this brain chemistry hormone combination. Tell me why you're so passionate about this topic today.
It's such a multifaceted question, but I think one that all women can resonate with. What I started seeing when I wrote the Menopause Reset was that there was definitely a lifestyle shift that needed to happen to women after 40. Mm-hmm. And, the story I think I told probably 2 years ago when I was here is that I hit 40 with one goal in mind. I wanted the number on the scale to be what I liked and my skinny jeans to fit. And I thought that was like the moment that I would, have, overcome the aging process if I could do that. And by 43, I was really, physically, emotionally a hot mess. And I didn't really recognize myself. And so what I started to do was really ask around all my friends who are 5-10 years ahead of me, what were you doing to navigate your 40s and the perimenopausal changes? And it was shocking to me how few people had a good answer, including medical doctors of all kinds that I was asking. And so I went researching what we needed to do. And that's where I came up with 5 lifestyle changes. And that's the premise of the Menopause Reset. And now what I'm seeing that really needs to be addressed are these brain changes. And I kind of touched on the surface of it in the Menopause Reset, but I sit here at 53. I'm almost a year without a cycle. So I just got the experience of what it's like to go a whole year with the lowest amount of estrogen that I've ever had in my life and what that does to your brain. And I have some deeper thoughts that I think we can really help women with because, there are some scary statistics out there. They're showing that the most common time for a woman to commit suicide is the decade 45 to 55. 70% of divorces that happen over 40 are instigated by women. 42% of women going through menopause will end up with chronic depression. And when we look at these statistics, we have to dive into why. And that's really what I'm doing now.
So when we talk about this thing about the brain, the reason that I think this is a fascinating conversation is I'm noticing this trend toward women being very fearful around, 1, the loss of hormones, and 2, this whole idea of, am I getting early onset dementia? My brain fog, my inability to remember. Like, there's a lot of fear around this particular conversation, which is why I think it's important that we have it, because I've only had a handful from the people I've learned from, like you. I'm saying to women, this is normal. This is part, or let's say this is common. It's common. This is part of the hormonal journey. And there are solutions to it. You are one of the solutions that I offer to people. So let's talk about that fear factor and even mindset and how that can compound maybe what's going on physiologically in our bodies.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And what the first thing I want women to know is that there is a dramatic neurochemical shift that happens after 40. And that dramatic neurochemical shift, and we'll go into the chemicals that we're seeing change, the neurochemicals that are changing, is not just causing you to gain weight. It's not just causing you to have trouble sleeping. It's not just giving you hot flashes, but it's also skewing the lens in which you are seeing life through. So if you are depressed, if you're anxious, if you have trouble holding on to words, I just want you to know that you are not alone, that this is happening to so many women. And this is a large part of why I'm writing this next book, is that women feel alone in the mental aspect of their journey. You know, it's really interesting when you look at the most common symptom to be talked about with menopause, it's hot flashes. And yeah, hot flashes are not fun, but they're not going to give you suicidal thoughts.
Right.
The loss of estradiol, the most potent estrogen in a female body that has been releasing eggs for you every single month. When she goes away, what's not being talked about is that she also stimulated dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, glutamate, and these are neurotransmitters that kept our brain functioning right. So one of the discussions I'm trying to crack open is, what do we have when we lose estradiol to backfill in and support these neurotransmitters? And just like I want women to make these lifestyle changes that I mapped out in the menopause reset, we also need to bring in some better understanding that you're not just losing estrogen. You are losing 4 to 5 major neurotransmitters that gave you the ability to hold on to information, gave you the ability to learn new information, that let you be happy. These are powerful neurotransmitters, and nobody's talking about that. And then you combine into that we're also losing progesterone, and progesterone gave you GABA that calmed you. So it's not surprising when I look at the statistic of women killing themselves from 45 to 55, when we look at it through a neurochemical lens, what I'm calling it in the new book is that it's an armor that we've had, this neurochemical armor. We've had all these neurochemicals to help us deal with the ebbs and flows of life, and it's now gone. And so we feel exposed, we feel irritable, we have trouble holding on to thoughts. And I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, but I just want to say, nobody's talking about it. Why is that? And that is where my passion lies now, is let's at least start to talk about it. So the first step is so that women understand that their mental health challenges right now are normal. Okay, once we can establish that, now, can we establish there are a lot of things you can do? But the first thing is we have to look at this neurochemical armor that's coming down. Okay, let's honor that, and let's be empathetic with ourselves and with each other.
That must be the thing that I was discussing with other people. Like, okay, you hit this point where you're like, I really don't care. And you have... Right. You just stop being so concerned about what other people are thinking. That makes so much sense, because you can see it. There's like this moment in a woman's life where we're all just like, whatever. Yes, I'm done.
Yes. You know, this is the thing, is that I've really been putting this out there because I think women are too scared to talk about it. Is estrogen is our nurturing hormone. So we lose estradiol, and then our body makes more of another estrogen called estrone. It's more popular. It's more common to be made after, as you get into the postmenopausal years. Estradiol, and think about this for a moment. This is how brilliant our bodies are. Estradiol gave us that desire to nurture and connect. And she needed to do that because her other job was to release an egg from our ovary. So if we had the emotional capability to nurture and connect at the same time as an egg would be released, our species would continue on. And now she's gone. And so our desire to nurture is kind of muted. I don't know if you feel that way, but I can tell you, I used to really care about everybody else around me. It's not that I don't care. I just have become more self-centered and I mean that in a very positive way. I've decided to return home to myself. And what do I need? I'm asking myself at 53, what do I need? What's important for me? And I think that our culture doesn't honor that. That's a big mental journey that women are going through as they go through menopause. Instead, we're told just take HRT, keep that estradiol up as high as you can. And yes, there's some wisdom in that, but there's also some wisdom in understanding what is emotionally changing in you. And I like to look at it as a neurochemical armor. It's come down. The way we relate to people is going to be different. And the other huge elephant in the room is as that armor comes down, a lot of times our traumas come to the surface. So in the new book, I'm really talking a lot about a lot of my traumas. And one of them was I had a near-death experience. And I had it at 35. And when I came out of it, I was a different person. And I never understood why. Well, once my neurochemical armor came down, I have had the opportunity to really heal that trauma. And I think that's another thing we can offer women is that the neurochemical armor is changing. The traumas are resurfacing. Now let's go to work to healing yourself so you can be the best version of yourself that the world has ever seen in your postmenopausal years, as opposed to shutting you up, medicating you, giving you more hormones to keep you quiet. I think it's time for the menopausal women to show what it means to heal ourselves and then turn around and heal a society.
It's very fascinating how many women are being prescribed like gabapentins and other things that are kind of, there's a lot of women. There's like seizure medicines that they're being prescribed for, which a gabapentin is a seizure medicine, or antidepressants that have these other layers to them. Now, let me be honest. I am not criticizing people who take this. What I'm trying to get to the bottom of is when we have this armor dropping and these things rising, to throw a lid on it, we're creating a dumpster fire for ourselves.
And then we're conflicted on the inside, and we have a culture that doesn't talk about it. In the new book, I call it the cultural hush. That there's just a like, shh, don't talk about menopause, don't talk about our periods. But the way you describe that is perfect. And I'm not criticizing medications either. I'm just saying if we take a step back and we go, there's an opportunity for a redesign of each one of us as this neurochemical armor comes down. There are a lot of things we can do to start to heal our own traumas, heal our own wounds. And when one woman heals herself, we open up a path for other women to follow.
Yeah.
So it's another form of shutting us up. And we need to come forward with love and compassion and understand ourselves so that we can heal and then turn around and heal other women. And when you put a lid on a dumpster fire, as we all know that, it's going to come back and it's not an effective way to deal with something that really has a lot of energy and to it. So
it's really fascinating because I think that when you talk about statistics about women who are committing suicide, I'm wondering, as you're talking, if we are not allowed, I'm using air quotes, to talk about these things, if there's shame or fear or guilt around something so natural and built into us. This is a natural process that we women are to go through. And all women go through it at some point, whether it's medically induced or it's natural. So why is there such shame around this? Why is there such hush hush around this? Because I have learned through women like yourself that I've had the honor to talk to, that it is a pathway. It's a portal into a greater, not that what we've done hasn't been great, but this is a new and different and greater opportunity for us as women to bloom. It's not a shutting down and ending of the road that we have been taught. It's the complete opposite.
Yeah. Amen to that. And here's the thing. When you go and you look at other cultures and how they handle menopause, Indonesia, for example, when a woman goes a full year without her period, she's now risen up as an elder in the community. Wow. And all the village goes to her to ask for her wisdom. Okay, in the Western culture, it's like, put the hysterical menopausal woman who's crying, who doesn't understand, who's irritable. I mean, let's just call the elephant out in the room. And that is, we're more irritable. Yeah, we're easy to agitate because that neurochemical armor's down and we're learning to get to know ourselves.
Yeah.
So we have to open this conversation up so that we can start to create another way to look at menopausal women, and other cultures have already figured it out. Our culture wants to keep us quiet, doesn't know what to do with us. And a lot of that, I'm going to get really, really strongly opinionated here, is because we are living in a patriarchal world. The patriarchal world doesn't want to talk about menstrual cycles, and the patriarchal world definitely doesn't want to talk about hysterical menopausal women. So in that, women are suffering. And when women suffer, we don't look outward, we turn inward. We don't blame the people around us, we blame ourselves. And that is the pain I am trying to help women relieve themselves of. Because if you don't understand your own brain through this process, it becomes very easy to start to say horrible things to yourself. And when you start saying horrible things to yourself, suicide becomes an option. And that's what we've got to change.
So what I hear you saying is we have this neurochemical armor that is driven by estradiol, and it's helping us be the servants that we've been.
Perfect.
Right? The lovers, yes, the servers, the nurturers. But our season of, I guess, birthing of people is passing into a birthing of a completely different kind of purpose.
Perfect. That's exactly.
Okay.
That is the essence of what the gift I want to give women. And is that I want everyone listening to understand and you said it so beautifully. You've spent a lot of your life birthing and caring for other people, whether you're a mom or not. And now it's time to birth and care for yourself. And that's what, if your hormones could talk to you, that's what they would tell you. The new shift in the neurochemical armor coming down, and the new shift in these hormones, it's like this wide open path that's emerging for you to step onto and to start to heal yourself. And the only way we're going to create a culture that's going to allow us to do that is if we have conversations like this, if we share podcasts out like this. I keep saying to on every podcast, to every group of women, I'm just here trying to crack open a conversation. Now let's all bravely and courageously step into that conversation and allow our vulnerabilities to be shown, allow ourselves to talk about the suffering we're going through in a positive way. And then let's go to work on healing ourselves. And when a woman heals, she doesn't heal in a silo. That is, it is a very masculine, patriarchal way that we have our healthcare system, where we go into a doctor's office and we go into a room by ourselves with a doctor. That's not the way that the feminine spirit and body heals. The feminine body heals amongst other women, nurturing them and understanding them and allowing us to understand this moment and figure out the right path for us. That's the vision I have for all of us.
It's that power of community.
Yeah.
Sharing in those common experiences that's so important to us as women.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about these 5 brain neurochemicals, from what I understand, the simplistic version is menopause is puberty in reverse. So before we have a period, our brain is talking to our adrenals. Then we start a period and it switches to our reproductive organ. And then now we're going back. And so the brain is trying to switch back to communicate with the adrenals. But here we are, not 12, 13, 14, but in our 40s and 50s with so much more pressure and stress that have been on our adrenals and on our central nervous system and our brains. So we are coming back to reset, I suppose, physically, but with so much more happening in our bodies. And you talked about being gentle with ourselves. And I think that's the message that I feel needs to be reminded that while this is natural and a lot of these things are common or normal, depending on what word you want to use, I'm hearing this reoccurring conversation around the beauty and the grace and the gentleness, the honoring of the journey, because our brains are changing. So let's talk about how we can gently, graciously accept. That might be the first step, the changes, because it is hard. It's attached to youth and vitality, right? So we have a mindset brain thing to overcome as well as the chemical brain thing to overcome. So can you kind of cover that for us?
Yeah, I think what's really the first step and the first door in for any woman listening to this is really to understand these brain changes. And one of them, let me give you an example, is that estradiol stimulates a very specific serotonin receptor site. It's called the 5-HT2A receptor for serotonin. You have your brain is bathed in these receptor sites. And so when they're stimulated by estradiol, you feel good. You feel like, oh, okay, like life is good. Well, there are two places that this receptor site really affects menopausal women. One is in the hippocampus. Okay, the hippocampus is mood and memory. So if you're not getting activation of this receptor site in the mood centers, your mood is going to be off. So the first thing that I would encourage a woman who's 48, 50 years old, maybe even 60, who has gone through this, is if you have a moment where you're like, I'm just not happy. I can't tell you how many menopausal women tell me that. I don't know. On life, everything looks great. I'm just not happy. Let's translate that into my 5-H2A serotonin receptor site isn't being stimulated right now. What can I do to start to stimulate that? What activity do I have? And we have some really cool things that are simple, like get out in the sunlight, start to exercise. Fasting even can improve some of these receptor sites. So in the new book, I'm going to map all of these out. But this is part of, I don't know if you've talked about psychedelics on your platform, but there's a big emergence of microdosing small amounts of mushrooms because they activate this serotonin receptor site. So the first thing is to translate our lack of joy and our irritability into understanding that it's not our fault. It is the change that's happening in our brain. And once we get that, now we can actually go and look at all the resources we have to help bring serotonin back. And I'm just using serotonin as an example. GABA is another one. We lose progesterone. Progesterone was the hormone that came in before our periods. And when it peaked, it allowed you to shed your uterine lining. But progesterone also had the ability to go into GABA receptors and calm us. And now we don't have that. So, okay, when I'm anxious and I'm irritable and I'm unhappy, but I look around and I'm like, on paper, everything looks good. Or maybe I have extra stress and I just can't seem to handle it. Let's go back to GABA. What can we do to increase GABA? Well, breathing. There's all the new breath work that's coming out in the world. There's incredible apps. There's incredible access to all different types of breathing. The most common one for GABA is called 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in through the nose for a count of 4, you hold it for a count of 7, and then you exhale out through the mouth for a count of 8. Okay, when I'm feeling irritable and anxious and not sure what to do with my growing, irritable thoughts, do I know that I could just sit down for 5 minutes and do a couple of rounds of breathing, and that's going to give me the neurochemical reserve that I don't have because of the loss of progesterone? Do you see that? You see the correlation? It's like, I want to help women understand this, and then I want to give them a big toolbox that they can dip into and decide which tool is working for them.
We've been, I guess, unaware of how much our body has been doing for us to sustain us to do what we've needed to do during these reproductive years. So I feel like if my words could communicate what I'm hearing, we've gone through our reproductive years and now we're going into our productive years.
Oh, that's good. I was thinking as you're talking, I'm like, that's really good. I love the way you think of words because I was thinking reproductive, and then we're going into redesign. But pro productive is also, yeah. I mean, it's the biggest message is it's this opportunity. It's not a curse. It is an opportunity. We just need to shift some of our lifestyle tools, and then we need to allow ourselves to go to work on healing ourselves so that the menopausal women can hold the foundation of a culture that is really lost right now. We have the wisdom, we have the patience. It's a really interesting time for the feminine to arise, and I feel like the feminine is going to rise in menopausal women if we take a pause in menopause and we start to look at how we can heal ourselves so we can turn around and heal the world.
You know, our brains are such beautifully complex, you know, such an amazing organ. The way that it's actually unfathomable at this point. Like the things that we know feel so big, and there's so much more that we don't know. But you've talked about how women become overwhelmed with their emotions, that lack of protection against our own negative thinking. So when we think about our brain, our mind is a little bit more existential because our mind is not just encased here, right? But what we focus on and what we think, how do we help ourselves as these things are changing? It feels like we don't have control over our thoughts. I remember that feeling of like, all right, there's days when I legitimately feel like I'm a little crazy, and I could logically understand that something was off, right? And I felt off, and it was like, what the heck is happening?
Yes. Amen.
And so I think as women, this powerful message of, okay, this is a season of the transition. Am I right?
Yes, it is. So the first thing is to understand it's a season.
Okay.
I love that word too, because I think what happens, and you tell me if this feels right to you in your menopausal brain, is like you think, oh God, is this the new brain I've got? Is this it? Is this the level of thought that's going to continue?
Yeah. And it's so scary to think it will be.
It's so scary. It's so scary. And thank you for saying that. And every woman listening to that, we need to acknowledge that it's scary. And yet it is a season. And so if we take this pause moment and we just decide, hey, okay, I'm going to get to know myself in a new light. Let me use myself as an example. When and I won't tell the whole story, but my near-death experience at 35 was I swam into a pile of Portuguese man-o-war when I was on vacation in Cabo San Lucas with my husband, and they wrapped all around me, and I went into anaphylactic shock, and my throat cut off. I went down the tunnel. I had the whole life review, the light, everything, and I came back. And when I came back, my brain, my amygdala, the fear part of my brain was like, you need to be prepared for any situation that might kill you again. So I became so hyper vigilant on making sure that bad shit didn't happen to me. I became such a control freak that it was elevating my stress.
Yes.
When I went into menopause, and estradiol started to go away, one of the things when estrogen goes away is we become more reactive to stress. And so I couldn't keep up with this trauma I had at 35 and the lack of estrogen. I couldn't control my world enough. And so I had to pause, and I had to say, okay, how can I go back and heal that trauma? And so I've done it in a lot of different ways. I've been in therapy. I've had to speak what I was saying, even to tell you the story. I was never able to really tell the jellyfish story without my throat closing. That's how primal it had been in my body. But in the last year and a half, I've been working on it. I've been healing it. And as I heal it, Now the lack of estrogen protecting my brain doesn't feel as harmful because I'm not trying to control my world due to a past trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. Yeah. This is such an interesting season of life, and women are experiencing it at different levels.
Yeah.
But there is a releasing that needs to take place.
That's it.
And it's, if I could sidetrack for a moment, I feel like I was just telling my daughters yesterday, I said, okay, I'm at that age. We were at Disneyland and I was looking around at different women and kind of observing how different ages handle self-consciousness. Because we were standing in line. I had nothing to do but to observe people. So I was just watching these young, beautiful girls being self-conscious, kind of that thing where you're like, who's looking at me? And I'm self-conscious. Then you have women my age and older. I'm 56 and they're just like, you can tell. They're just like, it doesn't matter how they're dressed. They don't care. They're just going to Disneyland. Right. And so it's interesting to me because there is a season, another one, where we're in now in our 50s, where you're still not air quotes old and you're still not air quotes young, but there's an expectation that we should fit. It's the pressure to fit into a very specific mold in my friggin' 50s.
Yes.
I'm like, I did not sign a contract that said I was going to look 25 forever. I didn't look 25 at 35. I didn't look 25 at 28. In other words, what are we doing to ourselves as women instead of having this gracious opening transition that you're talking about and pausing and being gentle with ourselves and being like, I am enough in where I'm at. This is a natural journey. And if I gain weight, which my body feels like an enemy in menopause because of different stressful things that we've gone through. And I'm trying to learn to love what my body is telling me. I've never had a weight problem in my life, but now here I am going, I don't like this, but look, why do I have to look a certain way? And this is that side conversation around being in our 50s when, why do we still impose this thing on ourselves that we have to be beautiful and thin and I don't know, our boobs should still be touching our chins. Mine have never been anywhere near my, unless I stood on my head, my boobs have never been near my chin. Let's just be clear about this. So do you understand what I'm saying? Like there's this other pressure.
Yes. I love the way you think and put your words together. And thank you for saying what so many of us are feeling. And because I didn't sign up to look like 25 either, but society wants me to look like 25. And I'm 53.
But we can't.
And it's funny, the boob thing is so funny because the other day, my boobs are small, but the other day I was like looking in the mirror, I'm like, I feel like my boobs look saggy. Maybe I should think about a different bra. And then I was like, of course they're freaking saggy. I've breastfed 2 babies.
Yep.
And I've been in gravity for 53 years. I've lost estrogen, which stimulated collagen that kept things tight. So the thing that is the biggest on my body is gonna sag. Like, let's just be okay with that. But instead, we've got women doing breast implants. We've got women doing Botox. And I understand. I've talked to a lot of women who will tell me, I just feel better.
Yeah.
And I get that. I honor that, whatever decision you make. But those are toxins that are making women more sick, not only physically, but emotionally. So again, I'm here to open this conversation up so that we can all do menopause our way. We don't have to do it the society's way. And a lot of us are saying what you just said. I don't want to do it as a 25-year-old. I want to do it as a 55-year-old, as a 65-year-old. And I sure as hell have a lot of more wisdom at 55 than I did at 25. And I don't want a society to push me aside because my boobs are sagging and I'm wrinkly. I want a society to look at me and say, please teach us a different way. But we need each woman going through menopause to really heal herself, because you can't heal others until you heal.
Right.
And that's the message I'm trying to bring forward now.
Because if our value is still in those things we can't truly control, or that don't really bring us joy, you know what I'm saying? Like, we have told ourselves that if I look a certain way, I'll be happy. But that's such a small piece of who we are as women. And to continue to be held to that minimal standard, is hurting ourselves. And I'm not saying you can't look good. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the motive behind it. That equals something that's greater than it should equal.
And you know what it equals is, can you love yourself in every season of life? Because maybe at 40 you could Botox and get a boob job, but what is that going to look like at 70? And if you don't stop at 40 to love yourself and to understand this new version of you, this shedding of this armor and the opportunity that exists, at somewhere down your aging line, you're going to hit a moment that you're going to have to do it. So how do we do it collectively as women, as we're going through this experience, support each other in that healing journey, so that now we've created a culture not of 70-year-olds that feel pushed aside, but we've created a culture of 60, 70, 80-year-old women that love themselves so deeply that they want to turn around and love a world that is really struggling right now. I really believe we are the ones to bring peace and ease and compassion back. It's our menopausal wisdom that can do that. But we're not going to do it if we don't love ourselves individually through this process.
Yeah. It's amazing how to shut a woman down is to cut off a lifeline.
So well said.
Right?
Well said. So well said. It's a lifeline. Oh my gosh, that's so beautifully said. Thank you. And that's what we need to bring back, because she's a lifeline to millions. People that are suffering, children that are suffering, a patriarchal society that's misled. If we don't, as menopausal women, rise up and heal ourselves, we aren't that lifeline. And the world needs the lifeline. That was so well said.
Thank you. It's what runs through my mind is, there's a book that I share every time I get near this topic, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh yeah.
And you were clearly communicating that our memories have to go somewhere. And if we don't process these things, if we've gone through life serving, which I loved serving my family and friends, but there is I can feel it. I feel this, like, almost like I'm being forced, to your point, pause and really recognize how much of this still serves properly. But there's, if I can sidetrack again, there's this conversation out there that keeps popping into my podcast email about selfishness and self-care. And I think that there's a line where it's a super healthy, wonderful thing. But I've also experienced it where it's like, screw you all. This is all about me. And I feel like there's got to be a gentler, more holistic way to communicate that concept that will protect marriages, that will protect relationships, that will protect our mindset and our bodies. Because and the thing is, it's kind of existential, but it does, in my mind, I keep ruminating on it. Every time I get an email on it, I'm like, okay, well, happiness isn't exactly a great goal, because happiness is fleeting. I think being at peace and having a settledness, an underlying kind of joy, not happiness, giddiness, I'm never unhappy, but just a peace and a graciousness. And yes, I need to make room for myself. But if there's only room for myself, then I'm cutting off that lifeline again. So I feel like maybe there's a season, and maybe you can help me process through this, where yes, we do need to turn in, and I have, absolutely. but it's for the purpose of, not for others per se, but it's for that purpose of being that greater, more evolved. I don't love that word, but do you see how I'm still processing?
Yeah, right. No, but this is because the conversation hasn't been had. So you keep processing, and every woman listening to this should keep processing. This is what I'm trying to open up this conversation. So let me give a little more context to what you're saying.
Yeah.
What I think happened to women in our patriarchal society is that the feminist movement had a bit of an aggression to it, because that was the energy that we needed to match the patriarch. The patriarch is aggressive. It is, to me, at the core of what the patriarch means, it's power over something. So
Yeah.
it doesn't, it doesn't have to be, it can be a system, it can be a human, it can be a lot of things.
Right.
But it has power over you. So when we came in as the feminist movement, we basically said, we'll match your energy and let you know we're allowed to sit at the table with you. And when we sat at the table, we became more masculine and had a more aggressive energy. Now, I will tell you, my concern for all women who choose to come with that kind of energy in their life, I mean, I honestly think this is not the way the female body was made. When we look at hormones, we are meant to have more recovery. We're meant to be a softer version of that. It doesn't mean we can't sit at the table with all the patriarchal constructs, but it does mean that we need a softer approach. So what I just heard in what you're saying is that, okay, there needs to be balance between I'm a badass and I'm an emotional, soft, ooey gooey woman, because both of those exist. And so menopause gives us the opportunity to bring those two things back together. We are a badass on so many levels because of the ups and the downs and the everything we've learned in our lives. And there's also a real gentle softness about us that if we allow that to emerge, that's where we heal the world. We don't heal the world in aggression. The world doesn't need more aggression. Right. The world needs us to integrate the feminine with the masculine. And when we don't have that reproductive science part of us with all those neurochemicals that have given us all the go to be there in the patriarch, when that all goes away, now the opportunity is for us to get to know our soft side, perhaps for the first time, but integrate it into our lives and show the world how it looks with authentic power. There is a soft, authentic power that the menopausal woman has, and let's let that shine.
And if we stay in that masculine power, what are we doing to our brain when we're continually trying to put a round peg in a square hole?
Well, I will tell you, I think this is why we've got dementia and Alzheimer's, is because it's too hard over time. And so we check out. On an emotional level, there are a lot of reasons for dementia and Alzheimer's. I'm not disputing the diabetes of the brain or the genetics, but I'm saying the emotional, energetic piece of those two things is, I think a lot of women are really tired of the fight. And they haven't been taught that they can be powerful in the soft. And until we solve that problem energetically, there is almost a benefit to checking out, whether we are consciously aware of that or not. It's the same thing with, why does autoimmune conditions happen to more women than men? Well, at the core of what an autoimmune condition is it's your immune system turning on yourself. So, at some point when we can't keep up with the patriarch, men, when they can't keep up, the traditional way that a man will approach that is that they'll say it's everybody else's problem. What a woman does is she turns around and says, it's my problem. So she turns on herself. So metaphorically, autoimmune is this energetic turning on ourselves, which is why it happens to more women. And this is why a conversation that you and I are having like this is so pivotal, so that we can all start to have a deeper understanding of these changes that are happening, as opposed to falling prey to just doing life the way we've always done it, and then finding out that we're suffering in the process.
And recognizing that, again, what we're going through is by design.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
So check this out. I had on my podcast, I brought on Dr. Daniel Amen.
Yes.
Love the man.
Me
He's
too.
so smart, so great, has a big heart, has a lot of women in his life. And I asked him, I was like, tell me about the female brain over 40. Why are we struggling? And here's what he said. He said, because primitively, you weren't meant to live that long. And I was like, well, that I just said, I mean, you can go listen to the podcast. I'm like, that's horrible. We weren't meant to live that long. But I've thought about that comment a lot, and I've gone back and revisited it a bit. And I realize that he is right on some sense. But that's not an okay answer. I mean, are we meant to reproduce? And then when the reproduction process goes away, we're meant to die? No, but there is a redesign that is available to us in that moment, so that maybe it's like, maybe there's a part of us that we can allow to die.
Yes.
Let's let that part die, to his point, and let's let a new version emerge. That's the message that I think is helpful for menopausal women right now.
Yeah, because one of the things I keep repeating as I have conversations like this is, okay, from 18 to 48, that's 30 years. Very reproductive years. Yep. In many ways, not just children, businesses, relationships, you name it. We're building, right? We've got our tool belt on, we're producing, we're reproducing. But from 48 to 78, that's the same amount of years, but at a completely different approach. We could have a completely different approach, is what you're saying. It's another complete adult life. Now, let's say we take 48 to 58 to have this season, let's say, of menopause. You still could live from 58 to 88 and still have that full 30 years to be productive, be redesigned, to explore the muchness that we are as people, as women, and have deeper, different relationships than we had before, releasing what no longer serves, but building greater things. You know what I'm saying? Like, some of the most productive people that I know are perimenopausal and beyond.
That's it.
Incredible creativity, incredible, compassion and grace, but firmness and clarity. Like, it's a beautiful thing.
Yes. Exactly. So let's not medicate it. Let's not shame it. Let's not put a lid on it. Let's open this up so that we can all learn, because we don't have a roadmap at this moment, because this is a new conversation that our society is about to have. Hopefully this podcast will get spread everywhere. The next book I'm writing hopefully will get out everywhere, so that we can start the conversation. Think about what you just said with The Body That Keeps the Score. It's a brilliant book, and it started a conversation that our traumas are in our cells. That's the opportunity that we have, that when we hear something like this, is to start to have the conversation of, wow, there's a redesign going into these productive years that I could step into if I fully understand myself and I fully accept the invitation. And that's what I want to do right now, is give the invitation for us all to talk about it. But there's going to take courage, because the patriarch doesn't want us to talk about our messiness. The patriarch doesn't like emotional ups and downs. So, as healing is not a soothing, peaceful process. Healing takes time, and it takes a willingness. But again, I go back to how I started this, is when one woman heals herself, and I love the word, she creates a lifeline for millions of other women. And when we get millions of other women healing themselves through this process, we create more lifelines for humanity to show up in a more loving and compassionate way. I truly believe that the world we all want to live in is going to exist once the menopausal women see that this transition is an opportunity to turn around and change the way that we're focusing on the world.
So you said something there about self-acceptance. That, I think, is a better word than self-love or being
Mm,
happy,
mm,
because self-love in isolation isn't doing anything for anybody.
yeah.
It might
Yeah.
not even do what it needs to do for me.
Right. Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? But that
Yeah.
self-acceptance, that gracious understanding of who I've been, honoring my own journey, as each woman honors what we've done to this point,
Yeah. So well
as
said.
good and beautiful. But to Dr. Amon's point, okay, that there's a not necessarily a death, that's pretty dramatic, but it kind of is. It's a dying off of the old way of thinking, the old way of doing. We bring some of that forward, but it's more like gleaning the seeds from that crop as opposed to trying to bring that whole crop with us into the
That's
next
right.
season, you
That's
know?
right.
And
Yeah.
so I think it's fascinating. And this is such a deep and wide conversation. And I think, to your point, Dr. Mindy, if we can start the conversation and get women to feel more comfortable grappling with grace
Yeah.
in this journey, and instead of judgment,
Yeah.
acceptance instead of criticalness,
Yeah.
and knowing that what's happening, back to the very beginning of our conversation, what's happening in our brains
Yeah.
is a neurochemical transition.
Yes.
And to the other things that you do, which we didn't even get into. I mean, we could probably have a series of 5 things and probably still wouldn't get to everything. But I
Probably
want to
not.
encourage people to look at these other elements, because you do talk about food, you do talk about
Yeah.
sleep, you talk about all kinds of things, because it's a multifaceted approach to nurturing our physical bodies.
Yeah.
And then as the emotional stuff comes up, then we nurture that emotional piece,
That's right. You got
right?
it.
And
Yeah. You got it.
then,
Yeah. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say, and then it's that next, it's all leading to that, what you're talking about.
Yeah. Oh my God. Again, so perfectly said. The physical piece, that's what I wrote about in the menopause reset. So if you don't know how to heal the physical piece from the changes in menopause, I have a book for you. The emotional piece, that's the new book. And then
Mm,
I feel like together as women, as menopausal women, we're going to figure out now the third step would be, how do we give back
yeah.
to society? There's Clarissa Estes, who wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves, has a beautiful book called The Power of the Crone. And this was where I read it last summer. And this was one of the first places I started to really gather this idea that there is something special waiting for us on the other side of menopause. And the first time that somebody told me about her book, I was like, I'm not a crone. What do you mean? I'm not, don't call me a crone. And then my friend said to me, do you know what crone means? And I was like, no. She said, it means crown. And I thought, oh my gosh, now there's a rebrand. So to your point, I really feel like once we understand ourselves through our physical changes that happen through menopause, and then our emotional and mental changes that happen through menopause, together, the feminine does things together. The masculine, the patriarch, does things alone. It has power over you. We don't do that in the matriarch and the feminine. We do it together. And I think we will all learn together how to create a culture that really highlights menopausal women and cares for the world through a menopausal woman's heart.
And when you say menopausal women, I just want to define that. This is a woman who has gone through and no longer has a cycle. We are menopausal once we've completed our reproductive years completely.
That's right. Yeah. 1 year without a period is pretty much considered, I mean, that's the clinical,
Yes.
but I would call you on your menopausal journey in your early 40s, because your armor is shifting. But to your point, your 40s should be more focused on the physical changes and the emotional changes. And you may not see the power you have until you get all the way to the other side.
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, I know if I heard this conversation, at 43, I may have not fully embraced it, but I can tell you at 53, and from what I'm seeing in how you're resonating with it, it's like those of us who have been through the walk, we're getting it. We're starting to see it. It's like you can't see the journey you're on often until you get to a new destination.
Mm-hmm. There's a real leaning in, not resisting this transition, but getting curious about it.
Yeah.
What is this feeling like for me? What are my friends going through? How are we walking together through this? And I'm so grateful. So what are 3 things, and if there's more than 3, but what are some things you really want people to anchor into as this conversation may be new to them? It might be in their own mind and they haven't talked to anybody else about it. But as women like ourselves, or those coming along behind us, especially in this season, what would you want them to really anchor into from this conversation?
I think the first thing is to understand you are neurochemically changing. So just understand that key thing. And so there's a reason for many of the symptoms that we've talked about. So once you understand that and you have compassion for yourself, then let's work on your lifestyle. Let's work on everything from how much you take on. I can tell you, I am like right now, I have completely been canceling things off my schedule as much as possible because I know that I need more nurturing for myself, and I'm the only one that's going to do that. So let's make sure that we're addressing more our food, our stress, our exercises should change. We need to look at some toxins. We need to go back and repair our microbiome. These are all things that I put in the the menopause reset. So work on your lifestyle. And then the third thing that if I had the other book, I'd say there's going to be and there will be, it'll come out in September of 2024. But until then, let's just have conversations with each other in a gentle way. If you're hearing this and when I speak like you and I have spoken today, I get so many women tell me that they cry and they're crying because they feel unheard. So as you listen to this information, the third step I would give you, if you resonate with it, is let's just start to gently open this conversation up with other women going through this process so you don't feel alone. And if we can come together as women going through the process, then I think I'll come back in another 2 years and you and I will have an amazing idea of how we can take all these women that have woken up through their menopausal journey, and together collectively, we could come and figure out how we can heal the world through our menopausal hearts.
I think the female journey is a beautiful thing. And because I'm not a man, I cannot speak to a man's journey. So I'm just saying for myself, I see the beauty of what we go through and how women show up in the world when we are in our best place, right? When we are whole and healed and we feel that peace, that inner peace. It's such a beautiful thing. I mean, I treasure the women in my life, and even the women like you that I only get to talk to once every 2 years, but there's a connection, a feminine connection to people.
Yep. Yeah. And, in our younger years, we competed, whether we were realized it or not. In our menopausal years, we collaborate.
Yes.
So when we talk about that connection, there's connection in going through something that nobody else is going through. And we're the ones going through this. The men, I have a beautiful husband and some incredible men in my life, but they don't really know what it's like to live in this body. Right. We've got a lot of really intelligent men that are talking about menopause out there, and I really appreciate that, but you don't know what it's like. So when we as women talk to each other and collaborate together, that's how the healing starts.
So really that's the goal, is to find your community that we can link arms and support each other through this. Wow. So how can people find you, and what resources do you have out there that people can connect to?
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of everywhere now, like you said.
Yes.
So you can go to drmindipelz.com. You can find a lot there. I've got Fast Like a Girl as a book out right now, Menopause Reset.
Mm-hmm.
My YouTube videos, I'm going to start talking about this more on YouTube. And really, if you want to dive into this right now, I have a membership academy called the Reset Academy. And we have 3,000 women in there, and we're having these conversations. So I'm starting to build the community so we can talk about it now as I'm writing the book. So
awesome. Well, Mindy, of course, I want to thank you so much for bringing your energy, your expertise, your passion, and your heart for women in this season of life, in bringing that community piece in terms of that heart toward you are not alone. And I appreciate, I can see you, and people who watch the video will see you. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, go to the video, because you're going to see, Mindy, I appreciate the passion and the drive and the tenacity with which you pursue these conversations and continue to ring the bell so that more women are heeding the call of the beauty of this transitional season and the power that comes behind it. Thank you so, so, so much.
Oh, thank you, Gina. Thank you. This was so beautiful. And I really appreciate you opening this conversation up so we can all have it in a deeper way. So thank you for your kind words and for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
It is totally my pleasure. And friends, if you are hearing this today on YouTube and you're watching us, just go down below. The links will be there. If you're on a podcast platform, you can head to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 346, and all of the show notes and links will be there. You know what, ladies, I have noticed in the last 6 months, this kind of conversation keeps coming into my podcast world. And I'm like, I'm not a menopause podcast, but you know what I am? I am realizing that these conversations are key to, I guess, mentoring those coming behind.
Yes.
Encouraging those that are in the midst and releasing those that are on the other side. So if the tool belt that I'm trying to build as a resource, a feminine roadmap, and what Mindy has in all of hers, if we as women not only tap into it for ourselves, but share it with our friends, and let's not be selfish with this. Let's start having these conversations. Let's have book clubs with these books. Let's investigate how we are transitioning ourselves and become more aware. Instead of pulling these wild plugs, settle, ponder, get curious, protect your peace during this season, and recognize that healing is good. Rest is good. Not being everything to everyone is okay. This outro could be another 10 minutes. So, friends, tap into what Dr. Mindy has for you. Tap into some of these past podcasts of mine. Find those people that speak a language that ministers to your heart and hang on to them and share them with every woman that you know. We want to thank you so much for taking the time to do that and for being with myself and tapping into Dr. Mindy's things and building this community of women. Us crones, as she said, us crowns. We are the crowns of the community when we step into this with courage, boldness, and grace. So thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to sharing more with you in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.